Good morning. Hi, welcome to the official Latina Cafecito time. I'm a little bit early, it looks like, or exactly at 9. We're going to be starting talking to before you take the LSAT today. So I'll just say thank you for tuning in to official Latina for Cafecito time. For those of you who may not know, I'm Cindy Petra Alfaro, and I am the founder of Latina LLC, also known as Latina JD or Official Latina. And I'm excited to introduce our guest today. So let's see, we'll connect with her now. I think we're waiting for the connection here.
Ooh, sorry.
Oh. Good morning.
Hey, good
How are
morning.
you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. So I was about to introduce you and read just your bio so our viewers know who I'm talking to today when we upload this to our YouTube channel.
Perfect.
So Doreen is 3L, third year at Columbia Law School. And she increased her LSAT score from a 148 to a 174. She created, before you take the LSAT, a community focus on providing insight into the legal profession, including from pre-law to LSAT to post-graduation careers within and beyond law school. Throughout law school, she has served in various roles, including in student government, externships clinics, and as a TA, and she's looking forward to speaking with us all today. So thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you for doing this. This is cool. I think it's like a curiosity for myself. Like once I graduated undergrad and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, I had wanted to start something like this. And
Yeah.
now that once I was in law school, I was like, I would still like to do something like this, but maybe for people who are studying law. So that's kind of how that came about. It's
Hmm.
been a lot of fun. I don't know if you've had the same experience, but it's really cool
It
connecting with
has.
people. I enjoy it.
Yeah, and then looking back and like now having to go through it and just being able to help someone either connect someone or help them read their admit like their diversity statement or something like that, and like if they just have a question in general about what is law school like, it feels good to be able to say what it is, because when I was in it I really didn't have anyone, and it was just
Yeah.
so vague and scary at the same time. So
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So I know that some people might know what the LSAT is, and or have an idea of going to law school, and if they're looking into if they're pre-law, but some people may not know what it is and why it's required to go to law school. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So LSAT stands for the Law School Admissions Test, and basically, most schools required it if you want to go. Recently, some schools have been accepting to a school that's not as well known. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of top law schools try to have students from as many undergraduate schools as they can. So if you go to a school that's rare or like not as many people from your school are applying, it might actually set you apart. So sometimes those things that people think are holding them back are actually the things that can help set them apart and make you noticed.
Definitely. Yeah. And I know that some people may not know what those, rankings are, or why they're important, or how much you should try to shoot for an LSAT. But I think that's kind of depends on where you want to go, correct? And what you're looking at. Like
Yeah,
what
I think
you're looking at.
I think people put a little bit too much emphasis on the rankings when they're choosing their law school. I think it really matters what you want to do with your degree.
Yeah.
Because, if you don't want to work at a big law firm, maybe it won't be as important to go to a top law school, for example. It depends. Like maybe there are a lot of other career paths where maybe it does matter,
Yeah.
but all of those things are important factors when you're kind of trying to pick your school and like deciding between opportunities where there might be money versus if
Hmm.
there's not. So yeah, I would just say.
Yeah. And so can you fill us in, like, what are some things that maybe a person should consider when applying? I know that if it's going to be, obviously the financial aspect is very important, if you're going to be able to get scholarships or not, but when the person is applying, what are some things that they should look for to a school so that they know how to target, what they want to do, like in their life, I guess. Like, do they want to practice or not practice? What are some things that they can look at besides the ranking?
Yeah, I would say like if you know your specific areas of law or some general areas of law that you're thinking about, maybe look at what programs the school offers. And honestly, beyond that, like I really think it helps a lot to talk to current students and not just the one that the admissions office connects you with, because it's kind of like their job to sell you on the school.
Yeah.
So if you can talk to people who um, if you could talk to people who are part of affinity groups or like student organizations, sometimes they're easier to reach than people realize. So maybe trying to reach out to them. But I would just learn about the programs that the school offers and
Hmm.
see like, if you're really into technology and law, like the intersection of technology and law, see if they have any programs on that. Like that might be, they might have some of the best professors or they might not, or they might have some like students who are interested in programs. Um, so I would look at all of those things. I think I would focus on programs, professors, subject areas that you're interested in, see what they offer.
Yeah. I think we have a question here. Someone says, can I require letters of recommendations or should I check the LSAT first? I guess she's referring to the application process. So,
Yeah. So you can definitely request letters of rec before you take the LSAT. It's fine, but you just usually the application usually requires that you've taken the LSAT before you can submit it. So
mm-hmm. Because do you still submit the letters through the LSAC website, correct? So you
yeah,
probably want to take that note what you got if you can to retake it again. That's what I did. I know that. Well, I let them know when I needed it, but I
yeah,
was also taking the LSAT to make sure that I was going to be applying in the long run. So
yeah.
yeah.
No, it's actually probably better to request it earlier on because to give your letter the recommender more time.
Yeah. And I know we were gonna talk about what's like the current situation with the LSAT right now, because I know some people either took it before this happened or it was moved or canceled out, and now I'm not actually sure what's going on. So I thought it would be good for you to fill us in on what's going on with that.
Yeah, so it's a tough time obviously in the whole world, but I guess that's affected the way the LSAT is being run, and I guess they've had to respond in a way that they don't normally, which has been to do an at-home remote proctored exam. So basically what happened is the April exam got canceled, and everyone who was signed up for March and April, which were both canceled, are now not invited. You could take the May exam instead, which is the LSAT Flex, which is the at-home remote proctored exam. It's 3 sections instead of 5. The 3 sections are just one each of the reading comp, the logical reasoning, and the logic games. It's still scored the same way, but there's going to be like both a person and like they use artificial intelligence to watch people as you're taking the exam. And there's kind of been mixed responses, but I think overall a lot of people are happy because it's a little bit shorter. It's 2 hours instead of like over three. And yeah, I think in some ways it might be a little bit easier just if for some people their issue is just staying focused for as long as it takes to take the 5 section exam. But I think, but the thing is, like, it's only an opportunity available for people who signed up for March and April, or if they originally were signed up for March and April and then switched to a later date. So some of
Hmm.
those people might not realize, but that's also an option for them. But yeah, it's a really weird situation. I know if I was studying for the LSAT right now and if I was in this, I think I would find it a little difficult, but I think it really is helpful if you just keep a mindset of like kind of just rolling with the punches because that's the current state, I guess, of the
Yeah.
world.
And that's
Um,
how law school is too. You just have to roll with the punches too.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true. It's a lot of you just kind of have to adapt. And I think in this situation, adapting means taking, you could practice taking exams that are 3 sections. I actually don't think it's a bad idea to continue doing some 5 section or 4 section exams just because that's going to be harder than what the day of the test is. So it's good to throw those in as well. But at this point, I think people who are studying, like, it helps to do 3 section exams and practice at home wherever you think you're going to take your exam on the day of the test for those who are
Yeah.
taking the April. The May LSAT, the LSAT Flex.
Yeah.
But and then also in terms of the future, that could affect the future exams as well, but we just don't know if they're going to continue to do it this way or how they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. And we do have some questions here. I think you kind of
Yeah.
answered this one. What do you think about the LSAT flags? Do you think it'll affect the next cycle at all? And that similar question right below that, do you feel they will continue with at-home proctor exams in the future?
Whoa, there's a lot of questions I didn't notice.
Yeah,
It
they're
just
coming in.
stopped.
We
It
have
just
one
stopped at
before
one.
that too. Yeah.
Sorry?
I said we have another one right before the last one I read too. So
Yeah. Okay, what do I think about the LSAT Flex? Okay, it's hard to tell because I think that they have to figure out a lot of things along the way. But if I had to say, I would probably say that it's more good than bad and like a lot more good than bad, just because it is part of what makes the LSAT difficult is the fact that you have to just give it your all for 5 sections, which is like over 3 hours. And some people, like sometimes you could just build the stamina through the practice that you do, but for a lot of people, it's taking that away, and that takes a lot of time to just build that. So for people who are taking it, I would just say like be happy with what you've got and run with it. Like just prepare yourself for a 3 section exam. If people were counting on the LR like helping them boost their score, like that might be unfortunate, or like if it's hard to study at home, that might be unfortunate. But if you could, whatever you can do, whatever is in your control, like if you can just get your family to um, be quiet during those certain hours if that's one of your issues. Like whatever you can do, I would just say start putting those things in place now so that whenever they announce the date, you're kind of getting used to having a similar routine as now you know exactly where your exam is going to be. Like
yeah,
usually people, you literally have a home advantage if you want
yeah,
to think of it like that. Like you can decide where in your home you're going to take it. You can consistently take it there and just yeah, go in with the expectation things like you never know like like I don't want to scare people but you just want to go in knowing that there's certain things you have control over certain things you don't and like you doing the best you can to make the things you have control over like prepared.
yeah, definitely. I know that if it were my situation, it would have been hard to concentrate with my family at home, especially with everybody doing their own thing. But I would hope that they will respect the opportunity to that you're doing this, that you're taking your time to study and prepare for it, and just take it and just ask them to respect that, I guess. But
Yeah.
I had test anxiety. I dealt with the tech anxiety all of law school. And when I took the LSAT, I think most of my anxiety was just going to a place I didn't know. I think for myself, being able to do it at home would have probably eased some of that stress, just personally, because
Yeah.
yeah, it's very nerve wracking going to a whole other environment that you've never been to, and sitting
Yeah.
down in a really cold room to take it.
Yeah, and now you can like control temperature, you can control like you're not gonna have to worry about like random people coughing and like people's like if they're nervous or like all those things can rub off on you and you might have other issues with family or like home stuff, but at least those are knowns and it's kind of like you have an expectation.
Yeah.
And I think they also asked, do you think it'll affect the next cycle at all? I'm not sure
Mhm.
what they mean by that, but I don't think that it'll make I don't think law schools will look at it any differently if that's what you mean. I think it'll be the same thing.
Yeah. I know we have one more question. It's kind of going back to materials, but there is one that goes along with this one. Is the LSAT flex only for US or do Canadian law schools do it too? I'm not actually familiar with a lot with a Canadian law school LSAT. Are you?
No, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
me
think but I
either.
think that if they're taking the LSAT though, I think it's the same across the board. I don't think they do it differently across the world. So if
Yeah.
you're taking the LSAT, I would assume it's the same.
Mm-hmm. And then we had one before. Is it good to get a letter of recommendation from a professional outside of my school, like my boss? I have one guaranteed from my academic advisor and was thinking of getting one from my boss as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to have both, especially if you have work experience. Like schools want to see both, but I think it's really, I mean, both of them are really important to have an academic letter of rec, so people, so the admissions office can see that you have a professor who can, support and say that they like what their experience was like with you, and then also to have your boss talk about their experience working with you as well.
Yeah.
But obviously, at the end of the day, like you don't want a letter of rec from somebody who's not like super enthusiastic about giving you one.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I would just take that into consideration as well. Like it's great to have one from your boss, but if they don't know you, like if you have someone, I don't know. I would just be careful about those types of things. You only want someone who's super enthusiastic and knows you well.
Yeah, and then a little bit about that. I actually recently, well, really on Friday, I wrote a blog for Legal Pipeline, and that it was concerning letters of recommendation, something I wish I had not worried about as much. And because I requested like 12 or 13 people to write me something like ridiculous like that, to write me letters, because I was so afraid that maybe what someone wouldn't come through. So then I realized that also I was looking at who had like the best title or something. In the long run, the ones that are really impactful and matter were the ones that people who knew me for so long
Yes.
and saw the growth as an individual for me and as a professional. So that was like the most important aspect and what helped me a lot through applying to law school. Those were like the best recommendations that I got. So
I have a question. Was there anything also that helped you for test anxiety? I tend to stay calm, but I'm curious like if something worked for you.
So I didn't figure out my test anxiety well into my last semester of law school. So I had a routine. I could not hear any music for 24 hours before an exam because music is very close to me. So I will get it stuck in my head and it will play loudly. I don't know if that makes any sense. And that would just give me more anxiety because I couldn't quiet my mind. So I would just use can't help head canceling headphones,
Noise canceling,
ear
yeah.
noise canceling headphones.
Yeah.
And I will have to make sure like all of my material was with me, like if it was open book or closed book, I needed to make sure that I was prepared, like my outline was prepared. If there was an outline, if there was no outline, I needed already to, I would practice the exams ahead of time, so that I knew how I was going to jump into an exam. And I just had this rituals of like even what I ate, what I drank as a smoothie every morning, what I ate was a lot of tuna, brown rice, blueberries, dark chocolate. Like those were like my go-to for an entire month of log, like the last month of my semester for each exam. And it was just the way I could control that anxiety. And
Think that that's something that might be a takeaway for some people. It really helps, like, you know what your schedule is, like, you know what you're gonna even eat on the day of the exam, like, that kind of stuff helps. Um, and then beyond that, like, you kind of just figured out what your triggers were, and I think that might be important for people. Like, if you can recognize your trigger and then try to brainstorm ways that you can address it. Um,
uh,
I would say though, like for you, it was music, right? Like you just realized that music was a trigger in a way, and so you
yeah.
stopped. Yeah, so you stopped listening to it for 24 hours. So I think sometimes there are smaller things that can help you. It could even just be having your supportive friends around you, like telling you, like Doreen or whatever, like whatever your
Yeah.
name. I'm excited for you. That's one thing. And then in terms of noise canceling headphones, I would personally say just like that is not something that's good for the LSAT. I think for when you get to
Oh.
law school, you could do that. But just
But
just
not
so
for
people know, like, yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I think the LSAT, the way that level of like that anxiety versus what an exam for law school would be were just very different. I'm
yeah.
not sure how to describe it, but they were very different than than
I
what
think
yeah.
I think one other thing I would add though in terms of test anxiety specifically for the LSAT is that usually you can retake it. And I know it's not fun and there's costs involved. Like there's a lot that goes into it, but I think that's what worked for me. I'm just like, well, and I had no plans to take it again after the first time I took it, which I did end up retaking it, but it's just it's hard. I don't know. It's hard to have that pressure when it's just like, okay, you could retake this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was that definitely eased the pressure when I took it again, and that was better. You can't really do that with law school exams, so I think the pressure is a little bit different.
For sure. And I would also say like people have pressure in terms of like, oh, if I retake it, then law school see my previous score. But the truth is that they only look at your highest score, or
Yeah.
they only factor that into because yeah, in terms of their rankings, that's what's important. So they really only like they have an incentive to take your highest score.
Yeah, so we have two more questions here.
Yeah.
One of them was kind of regarding the letters of recommendation. Hi, can you elaborate on letters of recommendation? Can you upload multiple letters onto LSAC and select specific ones to go to
Yeah.
different schools?
Yeah, you can definitely do that. But I think to go back to your point, you were saying like you had too many letters of rec, so just I would just be careful with that. But yes, you could definitely have letters of rec for specific schools. I think when you submit your letters of rec, there's an option to describe your that letter of rec like for yourself,
Mhm.
so that you can keep track of like what you wanted to do, like where you wanted to send it and stuff. So yeah, definitely that's an option.
Yeah, definitely. And for me, like those are the things the blog was about what I wish I had not stressed out, and I wrote what I wish I would have not stressed out about or done. That was one of the things that too many letters are rack, and that just added to just the extra stress that I put on myself and getting into the school I wanted to go to. So that's why.
But I think it is okay though if they know specific schools are like interesting and you want to go there
Mhm.
as long as you're doing it for some for a reason, it's okay.
Yeah. And then we'll have one more here. Can we talk about which prep materials you recommend? Blueprint, Kaplan, prep book, Bibles.
Uh so it's so hard because I don't like to especially if I don't like it, I don't want to say it, but even from the ones that you mentioned, there are some that are much worse than others. So I would just say when you were thinking about what you want to choose, like you should do research into it, but the starting point I think is just having the exams. Like that's the most important prep material you can have. And in terms of that, like LSAC actually has this program. It's $99 a year, I believe, and it has like most of the prep tests, and they're in the digital format, I believe, so you can just which is what you need. So I think that's the most important. Beyond that, personally, some programs I liked were Seven Sage. A lot of people tend to like the trainer. I've heard a lot of people like, I think her name is Ellen Cassidy. She has a book called The Loophole. So all of those people seem to like, but personally, I didn't like some of the bigger name companies. I never did Blueprint. So for people watching this video, you can't see all of them, but the other one that you mentioned, I'm personally not a big fan of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I used the LSAT Bible or something like it's been
Yeah,
some time, and I liked it just because it was affordable to me at that
yeah.
time compared to some other ones and some other programs, and I coming from a lower income class, it's just I couldn't do that, so I went to the library a lot and I just practiced with what was in the library, what was available to me. That's mainly it's a lot of just practice, especially with the game mind games. For me, that's what I
Yeah.
struggled the most, not with the reading and comprehension.
So I just want to throw it out there that I like use multiple different strategies, and I would want people to know that at the end of the day, I think what was most helpful for me was a lot of self-studying and like studying from books. So
Hmm.
I think that the LSAT studying can be affordable. It's just that a lot of people feel the pressure to take a prep course, and I don't think that you necessarily have to go like to an in-person prep course or like you can choose to do one online, but they tend to be a little bit less expensive anyways. But I just feel like a lot of people feel pressure to do certain things and you don't have to.
Yeah. And we have two more. We actually have getting quite a lot of questions, which is great. How old were we when we entered law school? I'm 23, but I think about going at 25. Is that too late? I don't think it's ever too late to go to law school. I even had classmates who were 60 years old, and
Wow.
is mind blowing. And anyone, I went to I got admitted to the daytime program, but I couldn't afford it mainly because of my temporary protected status. So and then instead of Indiana, they wouldn't give me in-state tuition for a while, and I had to fight for that. So I went to the evening program, which was the only way for me to afford it. And so I had classmates who had like full-time jobs. They were either business people or they had careers before that in some other way, and they had families, so they were in their 30s and their 40s and 50s. I had one classmate who was 60 years old, and I thought it was just interesting, incredible. I was one of the youngest in my class at that time. I think I was like 24 or 25 when, let's see. Oh my gosh, I can't do math. Like looking back, 2014, I was 24 years old when I went to law school. So that's, kind of seems to be the average, but I don't know. What was your experience like at Columbia?
Um, I think a lot, so it depends. So like there are quite a few people who are straight through and those can range from like 21-ish.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not as common. I think there are a lot of people who have work experience, so I would say like it's normal for people to be like 26, 27. But it really just depends like if I mean, yeah, I wouldn't worry about like if you're thinking about going at 25, I would not be worried about that at all. It also
Yeah.
depends, some schools care more about work experience than others, and so that tends to also affect it. So if the school cares about work experience, obviously people are going to be a little bit older. But or I mean, they might be like some schools, I don't know. It can range, but I wouldn't worry about being 25 and going to law school.
What age? Yeah, and I don't know, and that's probably another question that I was just thinking about. When you, and I don't know if you ever thought of this, what at some point with being on temporary protected status, which is similar to DACA. Some of you may not know what TPS is. So DACA, you haven't able to work in the U.S. But you're kind of just in this limbo because for TPS, you don't have a pathway to citizenship. So that was just really difficult. So long story short, at some point I had to debate, like, can I still continue law school? I want to. So, but I can't afford it. So I actually asked a couple of questions, a couple of times, what would happen if I had to take a break? Like if I had to work full time or something. Like I was working full time, but what if I had to pick up another job or something? And that was just really hard. And that my question is, I don't know about Columbia Law School because that's a much bigger school than I went to. Do you know if you guys had a certain time frame, like if you had to take a break from school, can you go back? Can you actually go back to school? I don't know if you ever had that question in law school. For us, we were told that we had basically you have to finish it within a time frame. I think it was like 6 or 7 years. You have to just come back, otherwise you can't come back again, or something like that. So
Um, I think that there is a time frame. I'm not sure how long the time frame is, but I know that you can take leave of absence for at least a year, if not more.
okay.
Um, I think I have heard of people who took, yeah, I know somebody who took 2 years leave of absence. So you can take breaks within law school. That's what you mean, right?
You have breaks basically, yeah.
Yeah, and you can just request one. I don't know how long you have to finish within, but I do know that there is a time limit on that, but I don't know how long it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure about us, but I just thought I would point it out, that if anyone had any questions about, okay, can I afford to go and what if I have to work, I know that there's some schools that will give you that 4-year program like mine did, but the majority are within a 3-year
Yeah.
time frame that you have to do that. I have another question here, and I think you kind of touched base about it. Does taking the LSAT more than 2 or 3 times hurt your application and your chances of getting accepted?
No. And I know that from personal experience. I took it multiple times and they just take your highest score.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. I had another person to say you guys should do this every day, or actually, which we should definitely do this another time, I think, for other people. But we're actually going to be doing these Cafecito times throughout the week, and within this month, every single day, during the weekdays at 9 a.m. So you guys should definitely tune in so you guys can hear some other legal minds talk to me, to like official Latinas. So. Anyways, I do have more questions. Sorry, my connection broke there for a second. Um, I was saying I do have some questions before we probably we'll be logging off here. But
Yeah.
can you let's see. Um, what are some steps I can take right now to improve my LSAT score? So if someone's in here who is like, okay, I took an LSAT, it's not the best, it's not where I want to be. What are some things that they can do to improve?
Um, yeah, I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're studying for the LSAT is that they focus on timing before they think about strategy, or they try to think about it at the same time. And that's really, it's so hard to do on the well on the LSAT when you have that mentality.
Mhm.
I would say that's one of the biggest things I recommend to people is to just focus on getting the strategy right. And I feel like it's so hard. Like people are just like, well, I need to like get my timing right. How am I going to do well if I can't finish within the right time frame? But the timing is something that comes with like experience of getting your strategy down. And if you keep practicing without having your strategy down, you can build bad habits. I wouldn't worry about that too much, but like if that's a motivator, that could be one thing to think about. But yeah, I would just focus on getting the strategy right and having a strategy for each different type of question that you're approaching. Another like general tip is to think about structure. A lot of times people get caught up in the topic that they're reading about on the LSAT, and it's really a lot of times less about the topic and a lot more about the structure. So within the LR and the reading comp section, like you want to think a lot more about the main conclusion, the premises, and reading comp. There are examples like author's opinion. All of those things are really important, and I feel like people just get caught up in the substance, like what it's talking about, and like trying to memorize or remember things. But if you have a general idea of the structure, it's a lot easier to refer back. And I'm kind of talking about LR and reading comp at the same time, so it might be a little confusing. But at the end of the day, all I'm talking about is structure and maybe just thinking about starting with thinking about the conclusion and the premises is probably the most important starting point for the
Yeah.
majority of questions.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you.
I do want to add one thing. Sorry, I
Yeah.
almost forgot. But the one other thing I would recommend, like in terms of improving your score right now, is if you're not familiar with blind review, like Google it. But basically, what it is, blind review is a way of taking your exam where you circle the questions that you're not sure about, and then before you score it, you kind of but after you've taken it under time conditions, you go back to the questions you circled, and now you do them like untimed and you compare your score when you took it regularly timed versus the blind review score, which is what you got when you had unlimited time to do the questions that you had circled, which are the ones you weren't unsure about. And that's a really great way to see how much of your issue is timing versus strategy. So
Awesome.
that's also that's also another
Yeah.
recommendation.
That
Yeah.
was a really good recommendation. We have a question here. What do you mean by structure? I think he's referring to the studying of.
Um, so like when you're reading something, I would focus less on um exactly what they're talking about. So like if they're talking about science or if they're talking about history, I wouldn't really care exactly what they're saying about science or history. Instead, I would say like, okay, so this person is trying to convince me that like they really didn't like the 1300s. So that's their conclusion that they really didn't like the 1300s. And they use the example of like this thing happening and another thing happening, and those were their premises. So it doesn't really matter to me that the topic is the 1300s or history or anything like that. The important thing that I'm taking away is that they want me to know that they didn't like that time period, and these are their two reasons for that. And when you focus on that, like a lot of things become clearer because a lot of the questions are asking you about gaps. So you want to think about like where is there a gap between the like premises that they're using versus the conclusion that they come to. And sometimes you want to weaken that gap even more, or you want to strengthen the gap, or you want to look for an assumption. So once you recognize those things, it's also easier to pick up patterns on the LSAT because then you realize like there's only so many ways you can have gaps, and if you start to recognize structure, you tend to it's more abstract, right? So when you think about structure, you want to think about things a little bit more abstractly, and that might help you to focus on what's important as opposed to like they're talking about trees or they're talking about history. Like that doesn't really matter.
Hmm. Well, thank you for answering. I think there was one more question we missed. Someone had asked, give me a second here to look it up again. What are the main things we should consider when choosing a school without having the ability to visit due to COVID-19?
Yikes, that's so difficult.
That is very difficult. Sorry, I keep touching my face, but my hands are clean, so it's just if anyone's noticing.
You're
But
good.
I'm without
No,
it,
I can. I'm
the
sorry.
school.
I'm happy to answer, but we can both answer if you'd like to say like if
Oh,
you.
well, I did have an opportunity to visit the schools. It was important for me because of how it felt on the how I felt about the campus,
Yes.
how
Hmm.
I felt about the professors I met and the people I saw and just the environment because you're gonna spend so much time. Like I lived at the like after work because I worked full time. I lived at the law school, so it was so important for me. And when I visited, I went to Indiana University in McKinney, which is in Indianapolis, and in Indiana, and it just felt like that was the place for me. Like I visited all these schools in Florida because I thought I consider Florida because it's so beautiful and it was affordable compared to Indiana, but um I ended up just loving IU McKinney. So that was just really hard, especially now. I can imagine that I would have a hard time picking at school because of that. So I'm not quite sure if I have an answer for you, but I know that what I also did was consider making a kind of like a not like a checklist, but like to see if the schools will meet certain requirements that I wanted for myself.
Yeah.
For me was financial, looking at statistics, like what was the employment rate after people got out of law school.
Yes. Yes.
The diversity of that school compared to others. Like I know that I do get a lot of questions from people to talk about just going to a law school when you're a minority, even as a woman, so those are some of the things that what is important to you, like what do you think you will need help considering when you're choosing a law school, what type of school you want to go to, what industry you want to go to. Is it that you want to practice law, that you want to come out and maybe be in-house counsel or work in the government sector, or do you want to work I'm trying to think what else I've seen it, work in HR or something like that, compliance or something like that. What is it that you want to do? Or even be a professor? Because there's also even different programs like JD, SJD, LLM nowadays. So there's a lot of different things that you need to consider. But I think those probably will come first before the feel of the school. And hopefully like, you'll be able to visit when this is over, even before saying yes to a school if you're in that process right now.
Yeah, I would also go back to trying to connect with current students. Like even if it's not in person, if you could do virtual coffee chats with people, if you guys are welcome to DM me if you'd like, I could try to connect you with people. But I would say like yeah, you still want to. I would not want to go to a school without having some idea of what the people there are like, because those are the
Yeah.
people you're going to be surrounded by. And like, if you can't be there physically, at least you could get a sense of the feel by the people you talk to. I just also wouldn't like put too much stock on like one person's view or one person's vibe because people really vary and everyone has different experiences and different opinions. So I would just be careful about that. But I would just try to reach out to people from that school, and if you have trouble, like you can reach out, you can ask me, and I'm happy to help. But I just feel like I wouldn't go to a school without having some idea of what the students there are like.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Same here. We have a couple of questions here. Have
Mm.
two BAs 9 years apart. Will law schools want grades for both?
I would say yes. I don't know how they'll look at it differently and if they're gonna average it and stuff, but I'm pretty sure that they're gonna look at both.
Yeah,
They're
they'll want
definitely
your
gonna want,
transcripts. So
yeah, 100%. They might put more weight on the more recent one. I don't know. And it depends why you have two BAs, like what made you want to do the second program.
yeah,
So
we have someone here. Did you save money for law school? Is it worth it?
Um, is it
I think it
it's
depends. It depends on what your ultimate goal will be when you graduate.
yeah.
Um, definitely. Like what's fulfilling to you? Honestly, that's like looking back, that's how I think about it. You know, what is fulfilling to you, and you're gonna be doing what you love when you get out. I know that um looking back, like I did save up some money, but I was in a very different position because I wasn't a US citizen, so I couldn't get any private loans or federal loans. So that was just really hard. So a lot of the time, that's why I worked full time, and that's why my parents just helped me, and I was blessed to have that. A lot of people don't have that. It was like a family effort. Even my brother helped me. So I was my situation was different, but I think when you talk to an attorney, they're gonna be like, okay, well, what is it that you want out of it, right? Like you're gonna get what you put into it and what you want out of it. I think those are like the main things. I don't know if that's very vague. How would you say to this person asking a question?
I think I honestly like I hesitated to answer because part of it is like the is it worth it question I think is something that's easier to answer down the line, like 5 to 10 years out.
Yeah.
And it's harder to answer. I'm still in law school right now, so it's a little bit harder for me to answer that question. Right now, do I feel like it's worth it? Yes, but will I say the same thing in 5 to 10 years? I really don't know. So I wouldn't want to give like a strong answer to that question, but I do like I really do believe that law school has shaped me into a very, not very, very different person, but like I've grown a lot through this process, and I'm really happy like to have experienced both. And I think that like it changes the way I think about things, how I analyze situations, decision making, like all of those things. And I don't know. I think that's really valuable, but
Yeah.
and it opens a lot of doors for careers, obviously, and things like
Hmm.
that. So all of that is really important, but it is super expensive, and I think things are changing so much that it's hard. It's hard to answer that question. I don't want to like give an answer that I don't necessarily mean. So
Yeah. I did have one more question here. Unfortunately, my phone might actually die, which is what I'm using. So I'll have to ask the question, and hopefully we'll have a little time to discuss. It actually goes with what you're talking about. Besides practice and law, in your experience of what you've seen, who you've met, what are some examples of using your law degree in a different career path besides practicing law? I thought we could just kind of leave with and finishing with that one, kind of talking about what can people get out of law school, and I think it goes in hand with this question.
honestly, you could do anything with a law degree, like really anything. I think the more common career paths, one of them you touched upon was academia, like you could become a professor. That's pretty common with a lot of law students. I mean, it's not easy to get. It's a hard. I think it's not that easy to become a law professor, but that's something
Yeah.
that's popular. People have an interest in that. It pays really well too.
Yeah.
Um, um, a lot of them are like because lawyers tend to be good writers, there's a lot in like journalism or I know there are some like legal correspondence, like some people just go into being like anchors or things like that. Um, what else?
I've seen people go kind of into compliance, and you don't have to have your license for that. I've seen people um, work in HR, like when it comes to, upholding types of laws, which kind of goes in the way with compliance with HR rules and stuff like that. Resolving issues, mediation is very important. Like
Yes, I was gonna say that one too,
a
yeah.
tool to have, and everywhere
Yes.
you're gonna use it, type of thing. I've seen people were do it even just contract negotiations, stuff like that. There's different fields too. Like if you, and another thing that most people actually may not know is that you don't have to pick what you want to do when you
Yeah.
get out of like not when you get out, but like during law school, like you can take your credits, what you want, but you don't have to specifically choose what you're going to do when you graduate, which is, I think, I took what was interesting to me. That's what I decided to do, and it ranged from immigration, human rights to business law. Like it really, very because those were my interests. So, um,
I would also add to that, like you could even, you could become an entrepreneur.
yeah,
A lot of people are
I
familiar
do.
with like, what? What was that?
I said that's what I'm doing. So,
There you go. I mean,
yeah,
it's just yeah, it teaches you a lot of skills that you can use in a lot of different areas, you know? A lot of people are familiar. I want to just give this example because I think it's cool. But Preet Bharara, he was the former United States Attorney for the Southern District of New York, and his brother also actually, excuse me, sorry, him and his brother both went to Columbia Law School, and I think they went around the same time too. And he was like on the law review and like really excelled academically and like was involved. And his brother was like not on the law review and like didn't care as much. He wasn't as invested. And his brother ended up starting a website called diapers.com, which ended up being one of the first websites that Amazon bought. And like he made a ton of money from that. And after Preet stopped working for the government, he actually started working with his brother. So I just think it's like so interesting. There's still, yeah, there's just so
yeah,
many different paths that you can take. And I don't, it's, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm glad that you brought up all these different examples because I think that's important to recognize that there's so much you could do with a law degree. And a
yeah.
lot of people, even if they start in law, and a lot of times they kind of like go down different paths.
Yeah, and that's how I ended up more in like the business and marketing side. That's what I'm doing now. And then besides Latina, I have other ventures, but that's kind of what I do right now. So you can do so many things, and I'm really grateful for that. So
Are you still practicing
yeah.
law?
No, I'm not. I actually took the bar exam in 2018, and that's not exactly what I wanted to do, and I didn't pass it. So when I didn't pass it, like it really hurt me, like my gut and like how I felt. Like it was just like, wow, am I supposed to do that? Or not? I mean, not supposed to practice law, but I didn't realize that if I wanted to go into legislation, which is my dream, then legislative law, then I didn't really need it. So I thought it was interesting, and then Latina kind of came along, and then I have two other companies that I'm working with too. So
Wow.
right now I'm kind of signing clients and stuff like that with marketing and stuff. So I thought it was pretty cool that it just kind of turned into something different. And I did do, I was a law clerk for a private firm before coming to Washington, and I did immigration law, and I really enjoyed it. But it I never thought I would end up in Washington State. I thought I was gonna end up in the other side in Washington DC. And just life just kind of took its own path, but that's okay. Just kind of I'm the type of person that just like we said rolls with the punches, and that's kind of what you
Yeah,
for law school. That's
100%.
who you have to be. Yeah,
100%.
yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on our live IG Cafecito time. I hope we can do this again and answer some different
Um,
questions. This was great. It was so nice meeting you.
It was really
Thank
nice meeting you. Thank you for hosting this. I hope that this was helpful for people, and thank you for preparing all these questions and like facilitating the conversation and stuff. And it was cool learning about you as well.
Yeah, it was really nice meeting you. Well, thank you everyone, and I hope you have a good day. And join us tomorrow for our 9 a.m. Cafecito time, and we're going to be talking to Olivia, and she is from my law school. So we'll be talking about what she does and about health. If you want to join about balancing life, your lifestyle with what's going on with COVID-19, we'll be talking about health. Bye, guys. Thank you so much. Bye.